Van Patten Media with a little WordPress tip that I thought I'd share with you. This one covers a tiny MCE, and I just wanted to show off some of the customizations and some of the changes that you can make to tiny MCE. So right now we're looking at the admin panel and a post-edit page for How I Booked It. And How I Booked It, if you haven't seen it, is a Van Patten Media side project. As you can see, our homepage here. It basically consists of interviews with a lot of actors and writers and directors, a lot of people in theater. So the interesting thing about the site, or one of the interesting parts, is that each of these interviews, they have the same questions and the same answers. So we had to format them very consistently, so that was evident when you were reading the site. And we also wanted to do some neat little features, like you can see here. There's a pull quote. The interviews are formatted very strictly along a left margin here, with the person interviewing or answering the question floating back to the left there. So we wanted to do a lot of formatting. And typically that kind of formatting you might not see in the visual editor. Out of the box in WordPress, the visual editor isn't all that useful because it doesn't necessarily correspond to what it's going to look like when you're actually viewing the site. We were able to, on this site, actually fix that using some built-in WordPress features that aren't used all that often. So I'm going to show those to you right now. So as you can see, the interview here actually corresponds pretty nicely with what you get on the front end. You have a lot of that same formatting along that left margin there that I showed you. You have the same colors, the same background and text colors. You have the text shadow, a very subtle text shadow that I put on there just to make the text pop a little bit. It all in all is actually, except for the font, and that's something we could have changed as well but chose not to. It's a very close approximation of how the site is going to look once it's live. So to give you a little demonstration of how this is done, I can show you the functions.php file for this theme. So we'll flip over into Sublime Text, and this is that theme's functions.php file. So if I scroll down here, you can see actually here a custom function here, a Hibi editor style. And this is where we add that editor style support. So we're using WordPress's built-in add theme support to add support for the editor style, and then we're adding the editor style itself, and we're referencing the path to that particular editor style sheet. This is relative to the root of your current active theme, but you could use different paths and things to pick somewhere that wasn't in your theme. This works for us. You could even reference directly your live style sheet if you like. We find it's best to go with something specifically tailored to the editor in question. Sometimes the visual editor gets things a little bit wrong, and you want to tweak things a little bit so it looks as close as you can get. Then we have an action here that calls that function on admin init. So that's really all you have to do. The editor style sheet is, for us, it's just copying and pasting some bits of style here and there, and you get this full style here that I just showed you. So again, it's exactly the same formatting. I can type in here. So if I'm typing a very long sentence, you'll see that it handles the break in lines perfectly. So you can see how that lines up there. And that's all handled very easily through CSS. So you'll also notice, looking at this, that we've got some other changes made to TinyMCE, or the visual editor, as well. So up here, normally there are a lot more buttons, and there's a second row that you can enable. We decided that for our purposes, that second row and those other buttons, they weren't all that useful. So we removed a lot of them and reorganized how they were set up so it was more useful to our purposes. So you can see we've only got bold, italics, some lists, links, undo and redo, remove formatting, and then the WP more, the insert the more tag. We've also added our own styles drop down here. I'll talk about that briefly in a second. And then the typical WordPress format option. But you'll see here we've actually removed most of the options. We only have an H3 available. So let's look briefly at that code. So you can actually see this is a plugin that we built, a custom plugin. These are using all native WordPress capabilities. So we hook right here into TinyMCE's top row of buttons. Down here there's an array listing all of the main buttons that come with WordPress out of the box. But up here we've gone through and we've only picked select ones that we want. And some of these buttons that are up here were actually buttons that belonged in the bottom row of buttons, as you can see down here, like the undo and redo for instance, and we've just moved them up to this first row. So the second row down here, as I mentioned before, we removed that entirely. So here is actually an empty array, and that just indicates to WordPress to not even make that second row available or an option. We hook into filters both times, the MCE buttons filter and the MCE buttons 2 there. And it's very easy. It's just an array with a list in there of the buttons that you want. And as you could see before, the output is exactly what you type is what you get, really. Very quick, very painless. So then I also mentioned that we have our own styles drop-down, and we also customized the format drop-down. So handling this is actually really easy as well. So in the style drop-down, we wanted to create our own custom options, our own custom tags. To do that, we use some nested arrays. These are all, again, WordPress core features. And we basically tell TinyMCE what tags to use, what styles that these certain tags should have, what classes, and how these tags should function. So in this case we have a pull quote that I showed you before, and I'm telling it certain settings that I want that to have, certain styles. And then I also give it a class, and I'm telling it to act as a wrapper for a bit of text. And I also tell it to have the aside block tag. And you can do the same for other tags as well. So we do the same for some p tags, some paragraph tags. So there are some that get indented, some that have no indent depending on certain formatting conditions. Again, really easy. And then down here, all of that gets encoded to JSON and then passed into settings, the settings variable here. And then in terms of, again, here we customize this format dropdown. Again, very easy. Here we just tell this theme advanced block formats bit here exactly which elements we want. And we can customize that with a list here. Now the reason that you might want to do some of this custom stuff up here that I showed you with the style formats as opposed to just listing something in the theme block formats is basically because with the theme advanced block formats you only get control over the tag. Here with these style formats you can also tell it a class. In this case we also set some inline styles so those carry over into the RSS feed, for instance. With the style formats you get a little more control, but which condition or which style format or block format, what you choose sort of depends on exactly what your needs are. So briefly, I'll just show you quickly pull quote inline. So I'm going to copy that, I'll paste it here, and you'll see it again. It handles that indenting perfectly. I'll hit styles, pull quote. You can see that it's moved my cursor over. Actually, I have to save a draft before it refreshes. That's a bug in TinyMCE. And you can see instantly it shows that that pull quote inline. And this is exactly how that pull quote would look if the browser here was a narrower width. We handle that all responsively. So that's basically how it's done. Again, this is just a really quick introduction. We actually have a full blog post over at the Van Patten Media blog, which you should definitely follow if you're not already. We've got tips like this, and again, a full blog post on the style selector. We'll have more coming soon on some of these other components that you can use to customize TinyMCE and make the visual editor easy to use. Thanks so much for checking this video out, and if you like it, stay tuned for more.